some of the fallacy of looking at just sleep hygiene in the quest for improvement of sleep leaves out a whole piece of the puzzle, which is your days actually have so much to do and such a major say in how your nights go.
Are you a solopreneur looking to 2 times your revenue to fund your lifestyle and give back? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you enjoy it, please subscribe for more. If you're a regular, thanks for your support. Love to get your feedback at paul@buildlivegive.com. It means the world to me when you do. Our guest is someone who spent most of her early career understanding how to better communicate with people. She ran a non-verbal event company and events, and she was so obsessed with helping others, she forgot to take care of herself. Her sleep patterns became so poor that she turned into an insomniac. Having created skills to solve this for herself, she now wants to transform the conversation about sleep for all. Why listen? She busts the key myths around sleep, learn some of the daily habits to improve your night sleep. The third thing is some cool apps to help you take control of your sleep. So now over to Mollie McGocklin from Sleep is a Skill. Welcome, Mollie McGocklin, to the Build, Live, Give podcast. Great to have you here, Mollie.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Look, my pleasure. So I know we've had great conversations as you've been sort of traveling the world with Blake, but why don't we start with something that your family or friends would know about you that we may not?
Oh, that's a great question. So one of the things that they actually know about me, and hopefully they still enjoy it, is that most of my family and friends are on this email list that I send out now 1,833 days in a row, which is what I'm grateful for in that day. And so I call them my gratefuls, and then I number them. And so they are all a part of what I've decided that I'm grateful for in that day. And it's actually been such a fun practice. And again, I hope that they're still enjoying that because they've been getting a lot of emails.
I was going to say, like, what's the open rate and what's the unsubscribe rate?
Exactly, because it's such a small group that it's kind of like, it's a little awkward to probably opt out for them. So hopefully they enjoy it. Hope they're grateful for them.
Yeah, and if they're listening now, don't put those Gmail filters on either.
Yes, exactly.
Take the time to read it. Oh, that's
Totally.
brilliant. That's great commitment. And now I know that you have been a behavioural specialist, or I suppose you still are. You did some comm stuff, but just take us through a little bit about what your career was before Sleep is a Skill eventuated.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So my background is really interesting. I originally went to college at Syracuse University for communications and rhetorical studies with a focus on psychology, and took that. But then I actually went in more of the communications route of it and was working in sales in New York, but just really wasn't fulfilled, and ended up shifting out of that in my mid-20s, and then went over into, I joined forces actually with my boyfriend, and started a company called Lecture Loft, where hosted having people into this large loft space that we had in Chelsea, Manhattan. And, so would have people come in and host different live events and workshops and what have you, which was exciting. And also then worked together on a company called the Nonverbal Group, which looks at nonverbal communication, and would host different classes, live classes out of that loft space in Chelsea. And that, was just such a fascinating period, and blended that in with trainings that we have for poker players to further be able to basically be able to spot tells at the poker table. So how you do that, is essentially being able to read players at the table based on how they're being, how they're holding themselves, how they're kind of showing up. So a lot of focus on people. And so, did that for many years. And then to the point that, basically, and we'll get into my story of how it came to be with sleep as a skill, but almost was, so involved in that just lost my balance in, maintaining, just kind of became a bit of a workaholic and was just working all the time on that. Very passionate about it, but didn't put in those, kind of burning the candle at both ends, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, look, it does. And we'll definitely dive more into that because I think the topic sleep is what I'm absolutely fascinated with. But
Yes.
just take us back to the non-verbal groups that you used to run and, the
Sure.
poker players. Like, what can we do if we're in a sales call? A lot of it's over Zoom for a lot of people these days. Coaches and consultants, we use a lot of Zoom. What are the sort of non-verbal things we should look for in a call?
Yeah. So great question. A lot of people struggle with that because, particularly with technology, it can be challenging to, create that kind of connection with another person because, you're not even some of the normal cues that we might do when we talk about, eye contact and eye gaze and all that stuff can get thrown off because, we don't really necessarily always know where to look. And, so some people, there is the opportunity to try to ensure that you're looking directly at the camera on your Zoom a bit more. But, some of those things can be tactics, but the overall strategy really ends up being less about those kind of like, okay, so let me make sure I make eye contact for a certain period of time and like the strategy, like as far as like strategizing, but
Yes.
having an overarching umbrella of how can I work to show up as my most authentic self? And I know that sounds very like, ugh, I'd rather just have the formula, but oftentimes, when we can begin to strip away that inauthenticity, trying to sound a particular way, show up in, as someone that's not us, then that's one of the biggest red flags, particularly in our culture now, as we've become also often voyeuristic in watching, Instagram stories or all these things that are just allow us just to kind of view how other people show up. We're getting really good at spotting when someone is not being themselves. And, and so then you can get into another conversation of, okay, well, what does that look like? But largely we're trying to help train ourselves to notice when we're kind of going out of alignment. And that's the thing that shows up on those Zoom calls and makes it feel awkward.
Yeah, look, I think that's great. And certainly I know for me and a lot of people that transition from corporate to running your own business is really hard in that, like I spent 20 years acting in a particular way, which is not how I'd act at home.
Yes.
Very professional. Coca-Cola is a very professional company. You had to, always be on your guard. And I've been 8 years now into my own business, nearly coming up to 9. And now I'm, how I am in a Zoom call is exactly how I am if I was talking to my family or my friends, and it took me so long to get there. So if what's any tips on how you could expedite that if that is something that people listening right now are facing that?
Sure. It's a great point, and congratulations on hitting those numbers. That's really exciting for you for your business. And really, one of the ways that we expedite that at the nonverbal group is looking at recording. So being able to film yourself and record yourself, and then play that back. The same way if you were a basketball player and you're kind of looking at your form and what have you, you can play that back to see, what's working, what's not working. And, many of us are very alarmed at what we see and we can be very judgmental of ourselves. But when we move past that, then we can start to notice, oh yeah, I do that thing. And we all have those things. But it really underscores it in a way that if someone tries to just give you that feedback, manually just tells it to you, it's very different experience than actually seeing it and getting it kind of in your bones.
Excellent. Well, look, I know we could spend so much time on this, but I definitely want to get to sleep in a moment because I know that's your, other expertise. But why the change to sleep as a skill? You briefly mentioned it before, but obviously it was driven by this loss of balance. But why? Why pursue this in particular?
Yeah. So it's the coolest story because it really was my own personal experience of really hitting my own rock bottom, essentially, which was just being the way that I was managing my life was just not working. Was really so for one thing, as it relates to sleep. Um, I was always just identified as for myself as a night owl. And I was just like, oh, that's just how it is. It didn't have anything wrong about it. And lived that way for many, many years. And, with having my own businesses, then could just go to bed pretty much as the sun was rising, birds are chirping and I'm going to bed. That was how my experience was for many years. And a lot of the people that I was surrounded in my own echo chamber were also night owls. So it just seemed fine until I kept doing that in alignment with stressors. We were actually running our own study for one of our companies, Beyond Tells, which is the poker company, which kind of blends nonverbal group and poker. And it was just, there's a lot of stress. There was the largest study ever conducted on poker players, self-funded. It's just like a lot to take on. And at the same time with those mismanagement of sleep. And then I started adding travel into the mix with jet lag, and which I never really experienced jet lag I hadn't really traveled that much until we started really taking things fully on the road, like long scale travel, 27-hour flights and what have you. So when I started pairing all those things together, it was just this perfect storm. And essentially what I experienced was my first real bout with insomnia. And it was an acute experience where I couldn't sleep. And felt like just such a low point in my life of like, I can't do something so simple, so basic, so primal that, every kid, can do or what have you. Like I would literally experience myself, in the airports and stuff, noticing people that were just effortlessly sleeping and really would have feelings of like jealousy and just be like, why can't I sleep? Why can't I do that? And and I'm making light of it now, but at the time it felt very, it felt like a period of my life where I just really was lacking of control. And of course it doesn't come from, it doesn't come out of a vacuum. There's a lot of things that I was doing as far as mismanaging my days and my work and all that. So it was a real wake up call. And then from that place, took one of my traits that, in some ways might have not served me, being so obsessive. And then it ended up actually serving me in the long run because I went down the rabbit hole on how to improve this or how to find a natural solution to what I was dealing with around my sleep. Because when I went to the doctors, overseas, they just in another language wrote out to me their equivalent of Ambien. And that was just not, it was kind of like a uh-oh moment. Like, this is not how I want my life to go. And then from there, really just, it became a quest to shift things. And what I ended up discovering felt really, really life-changing for me because everything changed from understanding circadian rhythm and chronobiology, understanding that, I really had to change everything about how I was organizing my days, my nights, what I was prioritizing, what I wasn't. And then to shift to now to sleeping better than I ever have in my whole life, to be able to work with so many people to shift their sleep and as it turns out to have this like ripple effect in so many other areas. It's just been so rewarding. And I'm finding that I think it's just what I'm calling this period of like sleep renaissance, where people are beginning to really wake up to the fact, no pun intended, that sleep is everything. It's just everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a brilliant segue into, what you're doing now. Look, I know there's so many myths around sleep, like I know I was a facilitator for Franklin Covey, and they had a course called 5 Choices. And, they like one of the things was, 2 hours before midnight, every hour before midnight was worth 2 post, and those sort of things. And some of it was backed by neuroscience, but some wasn't. What are some of the myths that you've broken down through all of your obsession with sleep? Yeah, what are the key myths that you've broken down?
Oh, that's a really great question. So some of the key myths, include that there are, for one, that there are certain types of sleepers, that there are, bad sleepers, good sleepers, light sleepers, this sleeper, these labels. And the labels I've found can really be damaging, because those can be some of the things that people then live within. And from that place, they're not approaching this from a skill set based, mentality, which is why I chose to title this company Sleep is a Skill, because
Yes.
I'm really making the argument that in our modern day society, sleep has now become a skill set. And, of course, if you were to go back into caveman era, you tried to tell, try to make this argument, and people would, they'd just couldn't even understand what you were saying, because it would sound so ridiculous. And yet today, based on how we're living our lives, it really is a bit of a skill. So, if that is the case, then it's something that we can really learn. And a lot of it has to do with deconstructing how we've related and the limiting beliefs that so many people have around the type of sleep that is, given to them, or that's possible for them.
Great. And what are some of the other myths, like blue light, mobile phones in rooms, mobile phones out? Are they, I suppose, are they some of the skills that you can help people, or are there other skills that are much better to concentrate on?
Well, one of the phrases that comes out a lot when you'll see, you do a quick Google, and because you're not sleeping well and you're exhausted and you want to just get some help. You do some quick Googles, and what will come up often is this concept of sleep hygiene. And, for those people not familiar, sleep hygiene is just meant to be this phrase that points to a particular way of setting up your evenings to pull for better sleep. Whether it's, only using your bed for just, sleep and sex, or, just, certain things around where your phone or your, electronics are, those sort of things. And those are all fantastic and great. And one of the myths that I point to is that some of the fallacy of looking at just sleep hygiene in the quest for improvement of sleep leaves out a whole piece of the puzzle, which is your days actually have so much to do and such a major say in how your nights go. So, it's really when I work with clients and, go through this whole process, really what we are looking at is we set them up with sleep bots. And so the first thing in the morning, they kind of go through a bit of a debrief of how their night went, and then basically then plan out their day from some of the things that we've discussed around how to strengthen their circadian rhythm. So one of the first things that we do is set them up to get outside, to get sunlight exposure, in the beginning of the morning, to anchor their day. And that actually relates to your kind of internal clock, which is linked, it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that's linked, right behind your eyes. So the light acts as one of the top signals for this. And if we're not paying attention to that first thing in the morning, then that can be a confusion for our body as it kind of tries to choreograph. There's a whole process that happens internally of knowing, when the liver is supposed to be doing its thing, while the digestive process is supposed to be doing its thing, while the brain's supposed to be cleaning out, its area. There's a whole thing that's meant to be on this beautiful, organized flow. And if we start having very sporadic sleep schedules, then that can confuse things. And so that begins during the day, not just the night.
Great. And what are some other things people can do through the day? So sunlight in the morning is great. What are some other key pattern changes to help with the night?
So when we speak about these pattern changes, what we're pointing to is what they're called as time givers. And so the time givers for circadian rhythm optimization, and, so they're actually linked up with this German word, Zeitgeber, but but it translates to time givers. And the top is that light. Right below that is temperature. So what impacts our bodily temperature? So obviously, number one is, being connected to that sunrise, which heats up the environment. So then it starts getting warmer. But so one of the other things we can do is be mindful of our temperature in our environments, because so many of us don't even get outside very often. And so you can actually ensure that your heating is on more of a circadian rhythm flow, so that you're warming up your environment a bit more during the day. And then you're ensuring that as you're looking to kind of, coax your body into more of a wind down period, that's when you cool down the environment. What else causes temperature fluctuations in the body? So one of the things is eating. So when we eat, that can actually warm up the body because it's really taxing the digestive process. So some of the things that we can do there is about being mindful of our meal timing. So some people experiment, certainly, looking at ensuring that we're not eating too late in the day, because then that can really disrupt the sleeping process. We can get more into that later, but and then another one is movement, because of course that will warm up the body. And so we want to do all these like warmth and like fiery things during the daylight hours as much as possible. And then as the sun sets, start, within reason, within our modern day society, beginning to shift over to more cooling practices. And the other cool thing is that can relate to thoughts too, because thoughts actually can either be cooling or actually heat you up, like the saying, kind of just like mad with anger or what have you. Like it really is true, because those things can also, cause your heart rate to go up in a heating process. So we're trying to keep all the active things earlier and then the calming things later, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, look, it does. And I've been listening and writing intently on the things that I'm going to change, not just for you and for everyone here. I'm going to, obviously have it in the show notes, but also this has been really educational for myself. But if I just switch gears just a little before we go into the live section.
Sure.
I know you're coming up with a course. It'll be, Sleep Reset online course. Just any tips for people, because a lot of people listening now, want to transfer their great IP that they've created one-on-one into a course, whatever their passion is. I know yours is sleep. Any quick tips on developing an online course?
Oh my God, great question. Because it's definitely can occur as overwhelming for a lot of people, depending on their background or what have you. And yet, I think one thing that has been helpful for me, thankfully, my boyfriend was he was a professor at CUNY for many years and in psychology, and brought that psychology, kind of the course curriculum concepts into his online training courses through poker and now with the nonverbal group. So I've gotten to be a part of all of that, but this is the first time for me of being in the driver's seat of the course creation. So what's been exciting about that is one of the best things is just the kind of paradigm shift of, okay, just say if you're in a room and you're just trying to convey what it is that people must know around sleep and how this can transform their days and how this will transform their life, and then parse it out piece by piece. So as if I was just, doing some sort of workshop or something, then what would be the most important things I would want to leave people with? So beginning from that place, for me, that just kind of freed me up to be like, oh, well, of course, I would see their faces and I would say X, Y, or Z. Because I don't know about other people, but my experience with the creation of it, there would be times when I get blocked because I wouldn't see a person right in front of me.
Yes.
So that was helpful. And then also for me, the want to make sure it's very interactive. So I'm doing a bit of a hybrid course. So people download, about 3 hours of content, but then they also have a drip method. So they kind of press go and then they start with, these, it's 45-day kind of process so that they go through all of that each day and then they can interact and have feedback. So, depending on your course style, starting to see what kind of vision you want to have come out, and then also creating frameworks by which everything kind of goes back to. So then it kind of makes it more understandable and bite size.
Great. And, I know sleep is, well, I'm generalizing here, but I think everyone could improve their sleep. But for you and this course Skill Reset, who are you going to really target with the course?
Yeah. So that's been interesting because my avatars are, there's actually some very funny groups that I have been working with. And so number one, this is how funny the two of them are. One is that a lot of them are I deal with a lot of menopausal women that are unfortunately going through such a shift in their hormones, that it can feel very much like they're, at a battle with their body and, trying to maintain that sense of equilibrium during a time when it's meant to be kind of anything but, unfortunately.
Yes.
So there's that group. There's also, so what it usually looks like is about 45 and above. And, people, and often it's people that are, able to create their own schedules. And as I think you might understand, and most of us that can create our own schedules, how much of a blessing and a curse that can be.
Yes.
So there's that. And then, so it's those people, and then also retirees, who are going through that, then they're being kind of awakened to that new sense of choice and then having difficulty managing that. And then thirdly, I have a lot of poker players that I work with as well, because, as cognitive athletes, they are looking for the edge at the table that they can, get in any way, shape, or form. And when they really rein in their sleep, particularly because they're such interesting people to cue into, because they are in often in, casino environments that are designed on purpose to be very disconnected from nature, or, no windows, just faux light, all of those things to confuse the body and kind of keep you staying there longer, really.
Great. Excellent. Well, I know there's lots, certainly for the menopausal women and 45s plus that create their own schedule. There's many of those people listening. So I know they can't wait for your course to come out. So just before we go into the live section, I'd like to tell you about my book called Build, Live, Give. I go through all the lessons I learned from leaving Coca-Cola to run my own business, how I scaled and kept it going whilst going through my kidney transplant. I will give you the same 5 growth drivers, which I've used to help hundreds of solopreneurs to build, live, give. Just go to buildlivegive.com/book and you can get your copy today. Of course, there'll be a link in the show notes, plus all the great content that Mollie has mentioned so far. So next we move into the live section, Mollie, and tell us about, other than sleep, obviously, tell us about some other daily habits which help you be successful.
Oh, yeah. So other than sleep, time blocking is my newest obsession. Not newest, but I feel like you can never quite reach an end at that. You can always get better.
How many minutes do you normally block?
Oh, yes. So what I've been finding is for more kind of like monkey tasks, if you will, like, kind of just some of the admin things that I might need to go through. Those are in 30-minute blocks. And then for more of my writing, then I've been doing 50-minute blocks. And it's just wonderful, 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 wonderful.
Yeah, look, I must admit that's probably been one of the biggest changes for my growth in business. And, what I do is just, and I better not say it because Siri will hear me, but I just, hey Siri, 30 minutes. There we go. It did. It just started up right there. So it's just started the timer. So I do that. And then I use...
That's great. I love that way of doing that. That's perfect.
And then I just use Toggle, TOGGL, and just record it. And then, at the end of the week, I sit down with my team and also my wife, Linda, and go through, am I spending my time in the right areas? But I think that has completely transformed my business. Do you track where you're spending those blocks of time?
Oh, yeah. So a couple of things that I've been, a couple of services that I've been liking to use, and then I'll speak to, the types of, what kind of time. So one, FocusMate, I don't know if you use that guide, the focusmate.com. That's super helpful. So basically you can do those 50-minute blocks on there, and you basically have a almost the same way it'd be like a Zoom call, but then there's another person with you, and it almost becomes, that effect of like the observer effect, because you have this other person. You just said you're going to finish, whatever, your newsletter in 50 minutes, and then they're sitting right in front of you, and then you both go to work and you have to tell them at the end what you got done.
Great.
Yes. So that's really fun. But just also very oddly helpful, that one. And then ultraworking.com, I found to be super helpful, and they get in the weeds with, the tracking. They take tracking to a whole other level. And they've got some cool people over there. There's like physicists that come through. You end up meeting some really interesting people because they'll do a giant Zoom group. And within 4 hours, I'll get things done in there that there's no way I would normally cram it into 4 hours.
Great. And what was that again? It was...
ultraworking.com. Ultra. Yeah. So like
Ultra. Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
Ultra working. Yeah. They've got a really cool thing going on over there.
Great. Well, I'll put both of those in the show notes. And I know we've spoken about Blake a couple of times, but he's listening right now. What would you like to say to him for the support he's given you?
Oh, I love that. Well, Blake, as you're listening, you've been wonderful for me, especially being by my side during my, sleep debacle, really, which, he was there for that whole period and would see me just struggling, and he was sleeping fine. And I was just, really a mess. And, I think other relationships might not have been able to, go through that and come out fine on the other side. And not only did we come out fine on the other side, but I feel like it just strengthened us to another level that it just feels uncommon for certainly any relationship I've ever been a part of. And, beyond that, just to be my champion, he's been just wonderful for all that I've been taking on with sleep as a skill, and, just all along, very much because it's hard. I would imagine it can be challenging in relationships maybe where there aren't two entrepreneurs, and
Yes.
To see all those ups and downs, I would imagine be hard to relate to, but he's not only relates, but really ensures to lift me up, which I really incredibly appreciative of.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to get some poker tips off Blake.
Yes,
when
100%.
I come and meet you guys
when
in
you
Vegas.
Come. Yes, please.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that'll be great.
We'll do that.
So the next section's the give section. So what's a charity or a community that you are passionate about, and why?
Well, it's perfect timing that you're discussing this, because I just had a conversation with my team, and we're actually adding the National Sleep Foundation to our website as proceeds proceeds from the Sleep is a Skill and our private trainings will go towards the reason, because I like from them counter to, there's other resources around sleep, but what I think is cool about what they're up to is they really push for some behavioral change practices and not going to some of the quick fixes, if you will, whether it's even to go from pharmaceuticals or supplements, because as great as supplements can be, there can also be yet another crutch or like, this will fix the problem. And then when it doesn't, it can be frustrating. Whereas they have done a great job of educating, and they also work with kids as far as bringing in elements of meditation and mindfulness. So it really feels holistic there.
Yeah, great. And look, certainly when I went through my transplant, I had a lot of prednisolone, pred, and I was just awake 18 hours of the day, and I knew that I needed to sleep, and my body, was trying to bring in a new organ, a foreign organ into my body, etc., and I couldn't sleep. And I think there could be a lot more done for people. So, I think that may be another target market for you down the track, is like people that have had major conditions or major operations. It's like, how do you get back to a normal sleep pattern again? Because in hospital you don't sleep, and you get back home and the medication's playing with you. Yeah, I found it really difficult. Where now, I do my meditation by swimming. I do my half an hour nap during the day. I've got my bedtime alarm for my iPhone, so I'm getting much better at it. But what I didn't realize is the daily habits. So some of those daily habits you've spoken about, I'll definitely add. So the last section is the action section, And I'll ask you 3 questions, actually 4, but 3 core ones, and get your rapid responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 personal effectiveness tips?
Oh, great. So number 1, I would say, as far as personal effectiveness, one of the things that's super important is your environment. So whether it's who you're, surrounding yourself with, and creating that environment that is just going to pull for success. I've really been leaning into accountability in ways that I hadn't in previous years, and it's just made all the difference.
Brilliant.
It's really just setting up structures so that, whether it's, weekly calls. I've been blown away with this concept around, there's a book called 12-Week Year. And so I've been aligning one of my masterminds around that, which has been phenomenal. So all of these methods to ensure that we have people around us that know what we're out to accomplish, and that we're doing that together. And just, that's been incredible. So that's number 1. I think in alignment with that, a fun thing that I would mention is this app called SPAR, which it's SPAR exclamation. And it sounds so silly, but it can be so fantastic for bringing in any of those habits that are so important for you to support you on your quest to, to really have a fantastic business, or, make a difference in the world. And yet you just have some sort of block or resistance. So this will raise the stakes. Of course, I know we keep talking poker lingo, but it will raise the stakes because, you'll say you want to do that thing, whatever it is. You want to, like I hosted a sunrise challenge on there. But if you don't show up, it gets charged. So you get charged like $20 a time or something. And this sounds so silly, but when you start to bring challenge and fun to those things that you want to shift, you can be surprised by how quickly your whole life will change if you continuously do things like that within, a couple of years. It's like you're a different person. It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm assuming like you're 1,833 day stretch on your gratitude email.
Gratitude.
Yeah, yes. That's brilliant. And the third thing? What's the third thing?
Yes. And so the third thing, actually, so this is kind of relates to sleep. But one of the things that I've found so important is consistency on the fundamentals. So what I mean by that is eat, move, sleep. And, it sounds so basic. It's almost like eye roll, like, oh God, come on, eat, move, sleep. But it really, for me, has been life-changing from a place of when I have those 3 things in order, then I know that I can show up each day consistently with just an extraordinary level of energy and, alertness that certainly in my prior life was just not common for me. And so now to have that as just a knowingness, when I put things in my calendar, it's like I know that best self is going to show up when I take care of myself. So having those things can make such a difference.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. And I've actually got a photo of myself and my best mate who was the donor, the day after the operation, and on my phone. And I build my daily and weekly habits. I build EMS first, and then I fit everything else around it because, I now feel like I've got a massive obligation to keep this kidney as healthy as it can because, he's given me the gift. So that's brilliant. What about a bit of tech? What's a bit of tech that you couldn't run your business without?
So, this one's a really fun one, is that virtually every person that I work with sleep as a skill gets at least the Oura ring. So if you're not familiar with that, it's spelled OURA. And the reason for that is that it's such a passive, automatic sleep tracker. And, are there things that could be, it's not a polysonogram. There's going to be things that are not, like, oh, we're not going to go crazy on some of the deep sleep REM stats, what have you, because it's not it's not connected to your brain. However, what it is fantastic at is creating a fairly reliable kind of snapshot of the sleep that you had, the night before, the time duration, and also get an idea of your kind of health and well-being. So we'll see your heart rate throughout the night, which can be really insightful around the type of sleep that you're getting, your HRV, which is just one of my favorite metrics, period, which is your heart rate variability, which can be so indicative of, how your stress levels are, how the health of your body. It's a metric that's very impacted by a number of things. So it can just be a very cool, nut to crack as you start to understand how to impact it. And what I get every morning is I have almost like an ESPN readout of everyone that I'm working with, their sleep numbers from the dashboard, like the coaching dashboard on the back of that. So it's phenomenal. And that helps really serve as a basis for then, as we have our conversations around what's working, what's not working with people's sleep, versus you can do an old school sleep diary. And even with that, there's a lot of things that people won't be able to see in the same way they see it with the Oura Ring, which you get that biofeedback.
Yeah, and I know a great mutual friend of ours is Ari Mizell, and I know he's always banging on about the O-Ring in his podcast. So that's excellent. Now, your ideas, so you've got some wonderful things that you're putting into sleep reset, but what is the best way for you to collect ideas?
Oh, to collect ideas. Yeah. So I have a weekly newsletter called Mollie's Monday Obsessions because I'm so obsessive with really researching, just learning. And it's actually like I've had to put myself on a bit of I've been calling it almost just an intake diet, because I could happily live to be 87 just reading, just listening to podcasts, just learning. Like my thirst for knowledge is crazy. So I've actually had to shift out of it purposefully and mindfully to more production because, I could easily stay in that world and be happy as a clam. So from that place, I will share some of my favorites, especially even with that info diet, how to get like the most important information for me. I set up different RSS feeds so that I get the information that I need to know about. I have different sleep studies that come to my email every single morning that are coded with keywords that are important for me to be on the lookout for. I will shift those depending on different projects that I'm working on. I have different filters set up in my email so that I have certain things that will come to me into certain categories to review around sleep or around projects that I'm taking on in that domain. So there's no shortage of ways to get information, but one of my favorite that I'm actually super passionate about, and it's so simple, but turning everything audio. So just about every article that I'll get, I'll put it into Pocket. And, have it be read back to me. So when I'm doing something that, I normally would be doing anyway, that I can make it something that for me, it feels so wonderful, which is that I get to learn during, so whether it's working out or what have you, I get to ensure that I'm always leaving with something new.
Yeah. So just a quick question on that Pocket. Can you speed up Pocket?
Yes, you can speed up Pocket.
Right.
Yes. And it actually has, what I like about Pocket now, because I did use another one before that, but now I've been using Pocket because they bring in the Amazon, it has a different name, but it's basically
Audible.
Yeah, it is through Audible. So Audible is awesome and they can speed up too, but there's an Amazon tech that has a particular type of AI for their readback. So they have different options. You can have different voices, but they make it sound, they have better inflections than some of the other ones. So it sounds a little less like, like the old school Siri and how it sounds so weird. It doesn't do that. So I've been actually really enjoying that. And yes, you can speed it up, which I find so important.
Oh, well, look, we could talk forever. I'll have to have you back on the show, actually, especially when the course launches, and love to have you back on. But last question, and it's the big question. What impact do you want to leave on the world?
So my mission on this planet is to transform the conversation around sleep, period. So for me, I think the reason why it's so important and so vital for me and just lights me up every day is because of the fact that my life feels so different. And so I have such a sense of power around how I feel now that I never knew was possible. And it's a direct correlation from what I've learned in the area of sleep, circadian rhythm, chronobiology. And it's so important. And when I work with other people and they get to see the same, it becomes this thing of like, why isn't everyone doing this? Why doesn't everyone know about this? We must make this a regular conversation piece. And it's just so wonderful. I think it's an exciting time. And more and more people are willing to do what's necessary to shift this area.
Yeah, and look, I love all of what you said today, but in particular, I love that thing around, you're not a type of sleeper, that you can improve a skill to improve your sleep. And, people can find out more at sleepisaskill.com. There will be the Sleep Reset online course out coming, is it around March?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Mollie?
So at the end of February and releasing, so certainly in the beginning of March, it will be available, which is really exciting. A labor of love.
Right. And look, I also recommend you sign up to her newsletter. I definitely will straight after this Mollie's Monday Obsessions.
Great.
I wouldn't recommend maybe getting on the gratitude one because
you can't get off.
Because you can't get off it. But
Ever.
The Monday one, I think you can unsubscribe at some point.
You can't. Dying. Oh, my poor people. I should check in with my poor friends and family.
Look, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, sharing so much value. And, sleep is, having had a lot of issues with sleep due to my illness. Now, to me, it's the very first thing that I go to. And it's the first thing that a doctor, a practitioner, what do you call them in the States?
Oh, yeah. A doctor, a functional medicine doctor. Yep. Any of those.
Yeah, any of those that's the first question they should ask when you walk into their rooms is, what's your sleep patterns like? Because I think they often miss that. And then, it's a domino effect from there. But anyway, Mollie, as I said, I could talk forever, but brilliant having you on the show and have a great night.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
That was such a great show with Mollie. I was so enthralled. I was taking so many notes. I know it went a bit longer than normal, but it was fantastic. You can get all the links in the show notes at buildlivegive.com, just /podcast. If you believe someone could also benefit from this, and let's be honest, who doesn't need better sleep? Please share. And also, Mollie would love to get some feedback and some appreciation. So look her up on LinkedIn. The profile will be in the show notes as well. You can get the Build Live Give book at buildlivegive.com /book. If you have it and you like it, I'd love to get a review on, particular on Amazon. The link will be in the show notes to that as well. So please take action to build your business and lifestyle.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.